In episode 4, June heads to her weekly therapy session. She recently had an incident where she was at the park with Nicole and someone came up and recognized her. At first, it seemed a little friendly, but then things just got weird. The woman called June a whore because she's pro-Gilead. She even went so far as to say that June was lucky to be in Gilead, and that's when June kind of snapped. She put her hands on her, threatened her, so that gets brought up in the therapy session. And while June was in this session, Serena was being released. Mark lets her know that the Canadian government isn't going to surveil her 100% of the time. She'll have some semblance of privacy. But he does make a one last-ditch plea for her to accept Canada's offer for asylum. As an American citizen, she has that right, but she says, "I'm not an American citizen. My allegiance is to God." He then releases her from custody. She's going to be restricted to affiliated Gilead properties, this within accordance of her lack of diplomatic status. She basically has no money, and she's homeless, but she's not without friends. She obviously has the support of some people in Canada, but Gilead has set her up with a driver named Ezra Shaw. She'll be living in some Gilead property that was owned before the war. In an effort to improve relations, Canada unfreezed the property, so Gilead is all but building an embassy. Of course, they're not calling it that. They're calling it a cultural center. It's currently being built, and that's where Serena will live and work and really be the poster child for the pro-Gilead way of life. After he releases Serena out to the public, Mark heads over to let June know what's going on. He meets with June, Luke, Moira, but before he can even get any of this out, they want to know all about Hannah. And he tells them that she looked very healthy, but they're pissed off about the fact that he didn't bring Hannah back with him. So already tensions are pretty high when he lets them know that Serena is now released, and there's nothing he can do about it. While the women in the room aren't happy about this, it's actually Luke who gets the most upset, and he kicks Mark out of the house. Right before he leaves, he tells June she has no money, she has no place to live, she's very limited. But June just shakes her head and says, "I warned you about her. She's dangerous. But you won't listen. You're such a disappointment." And he tells her, maybe your expectations were a little unrealistic. Once he leaves, Luke starts talking about how they're going to shut this thing down, all the things they can do, but June is oddly very calm, and that's because she knows she has a weapon buried outside. In the middle of the night, she goes and she digs up that gun, and she drives to the Gilead embassy. She starts trying to cock it back, but the damn thing has got frozen dirt in it, so she's going to have to clean it beforehand. But she's not willing to just leave and not make her presence felt. She drives up to the front of the building, gets out, and stares up where she sees Serena staring back at her. It freaks Serena out quite a bit, but as Ezra tells her, there's nothing I can do about prohibiting her from driving around. We'll beef up security, but that's about it. Once June gets home, she tells Luke that she drove over there, and all she can think about is shooting Serena in the head, and she can't stop thinking about it. Luke starts trying to calm her down, reminding her that there's no army this time. They literally have a building, and by the way, that building has building codes that probably aren't up to spec. There is a path to shutting them down. But in June's mind, that's not going to be enough. He then reminds her that if she shoots her in the head, it's going to give her instant gratification, but then they'll take Nicole from her. They'll arrest her. They'll lock her up. And by losing Nicole and getting locked up, they lose any chance they had of getting Hannah back. This does end up working a little bit. It calms June down for the time being, and the two head off to bed. Even with the visual of June staring at her from the street level, Serena has a job to do. And the next day, she's trying to get to it, but she's noticing a trend. Some consulants have extended invitations to her, but Lawrence or somebody else from Gilead is declining them on her behalf. So she calls up Lawrence to find out why that is. Lawrence tells her that she doesn't need to overexert herself. Everybody's already thrilled with her work, but she feels like she's being silenced. She reminds Lawrence that women in South America have only heard the worst of Gilead, and it's important to remind the consulate that their methods are working. They're the only country to see a rise in birth rates. So Lawrence begrudgingly tells her that Venezuela has been open to some of their methods, and he'll set up a tea date that she can go and make her pitch at. Lawrence then suggests that Serena stay away from June. He heard about the incident, and while Serena says that she's not that easily intimidated, her face and her tone say otherwise. But she's not going to give in to June quite yet. In fact, she wants to show June that she's not intimidated by her. So she sends her a card in the mail that is addressed to Offred. And it says, the Republic of Gilead is pleased to announce the opening of a Gilead Information Center. And that infuriates June. She, along with Luke and Moira, by the way, are worried that with Serena having a lot of support of the world behind her now with that PR stunt of a funeral, she's going to slowly creep the Gilead lifestyle into Canada. And next thing you know, Canada is going to become the new Gilead. June ends up yelling at Luke that the only way to stop her and stop Gilead is to put all of them in the ground. She then has to go tend to Nicole, who is crying, but she's still extremely annoyed. She's sick of Luke telling her to calm down, and she vents to Moira that apparently Luke forgot none of this worked the first time Gilead took over her country. But Moira gives June the truth, which is Luke's right. She reminds June that this is a refugee town, and an overcrowded one at that. You've got to play by the rules or you get thrown in jail for just stepping out of line a little bit. And Moira, just like Luke, tells June, Serena is not worth losing your family over. Deep down, June knows that Moira and Luke are right, but she still needs time to calm down, so she just sits in baby Nicole's room for a little bit. And while June is frustrated by the way Luke is handling it, he isn't just sitting on his hands. While June was upstairs venting to Moira, Luke headed out. He went to go meet with Serena. Luke pulls out a stack of papers and tells her, these are all building codes. I found 15 violations. I make one call, this place gets shut down. Serena, though, isn't that concerned about the building code situation. She asked Luke, is that really what you came here to tell me? And Luke says, no. I also came here to tell you that my wife is going to kill you. And I'm going to let her. So, you could get kicked out, you could be killed, or you could just help us get Hannah back. But Serena tells him that Hannah, or as she refers to her, Agnes, is happy. And who is she to get in the way of God's will when Agnes has loving parents? She then really hits home with Luke when she asks, I always wondered why you didn't risk your life to come back and save your daughter. I mean, your wife, she was there and she was suffering. Although I know that she had Nick's support and that probably gave you a little bit of comfort. These comments absolutely crush Luke, but the only thing he does is crumple up some papers in his hand and warn Serena that she stay away from his family or the next time he sees her, he'll kill her himself. Luke then leaves and Serena gets ready to do a photo shoot, but outside there's quite a commotion. You've got pro-Serena people and pro-Gilead, and then you've got protesters. One of those protesters just so happens to be June. She cleaned the gun, and she headed over to the Gilead embassy with plans on visiting Serena. But when she saw the crowd, she got involved. When one of the pro-Gilead people tells Moira there is no America and then punches her, June pulls out the gun, pointing it at him. And then all of a sudden, he becomes a little bit of a soy boy. I can say that because I am a soy boy. But then June goes off and fires the gun into the air. And the crowd disperses pretty quickly. Inside the building, an already heightened Serena gets pretty scared, and Ezra ushers her outside. As June is trying to flee, she just so happens to run into Luke. And as they both try to flee, they see Serena escaping from the back door. Now's June's chance. She has Serena dead to rights. She has a gun, but she doesn't pull it. She just lets Serena go. June and Luke then head home, and Luke gives her a little bit of good news. He's got a friend downtown who's going to shut down the embassy before it can even open because of construction and zoning problems. She tells Luke, I didn't do it this time, but I can't promise that I won't do it next time. And he tells her, well, I can't promise that I won't do it either. They then end up having sex, so that's cool. With the threat against her life, though, Serena has to get to a secure location, and Ezra finds one. He escorts her to her house where a woman comes down and she is absolutely starstruck to be in the presence of Serena Waterford. Her name is Alanis Wheeler. Her husband is Ryan Wheeler. And when she sees Serena, and more importantly, Serena's baby bump, she gets down on her knees and she starts praying. It's weird. Even Serena seems to be a little bit uncomfortable. But back in Gilead, Janine is back on the mend. And by her side, she's got Aunt Lydia. Although she doesn't want Aunt Lydia anywhere near her. She's kind of fed up with playing the game. She's annoyed at what's going on. And she takes great offense to when Aunt Lydia blames everything on Esther. not seeing maybe why Esther acted out, the whole fact that she was raped at such a young age. Janine doesn't blame Esther at all. She thinks that her actions were actually justified. And Aunt Lydia just feels like Janine lashing out has to do more with June's influence than anybody else. Aunt Lydia feels like she has to do something. So she goes to Commander Lawrence and suggests that they change the Handmaids situation up. Her proposal is the Handmaids no longer live with their commanders. They live by themselves in one secure location where Aunt Lydia can watch after them. And then once a month, the commanders show up, they do the ceremony, and then they leave. But Commander Lawrence laughs that off. He tells Aunt Lydia these are pious men. They need to get their rocks off somewhere. The handmaid system isn't changing. Not now. Just get a grip on them. But in order to do that, she's going to need somebody on her side. And she feels like the person to be able to do that would be Janine. She apologizes to Janine, saying that she should have listened to her about Esther. But then she says, I need your help. You know these girls. I need you to watch over them and tell me when they're struggling. And Janine says, Aunt Lydia, if I do that, you're going to do something horrible, like poke their eye out or send them to the colony. But Lydia says, no, I won't. I want to do things differently. I want to address problems with more compassion. Janine, though, doesn't say anything. Aunt Lydia then escorts her back into the barracks with the handmaids, where once she leaves, the girls surround Janine to hear about everything she just went through, because Janine to them is like a rock star. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.